That's the name of our show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Large Glass. My name's Todd.
I'm Terri.
And this is our show where we bring you every week a new artist to talk to. Now, I used to say to talk about, but now we're talking to the artists as a regular gig. Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going okay.
We got a lot of people in the chat already. Of course, Mom's there. Hi, Mom. Nice to see you. Pumpkin Audrey, Jess Park, John Park, Ben, Dave. Good to see you all. It's nice to have you here as per the usual.
Yes.
We're, how you all doing? Everybody holding up okay? I'm a little shell-shocked. So I had 2 back-to-back classes today for the first time this semester, taught remotely. I've been sitting in front of this camera all day. So if all of a sudden, you know, my eyes cross a little bit or something goes wrong, it's just, you know, Terry's going to take over and she'll put me to bed.
There you go.
There's 63. What's
Hello.
going on, 63? Nice to see you. That was weird. All of a sudden, the camera just went black and then came back on. That's good. We are going to inevitably, something's going wrong already with the video feed. I don't like it. I don't like it. All right. We'll look, we deal with this stuff.
Yeah.
This is how it goes.
Every week.
Something happens. You know, you walk in here and it looks like freaking NASA, but does it work? No. It's like it's like a Dodge. It looks really good.
What are we drinking
but it's a
tonight,
piece
Todd?
of shit. Okay, sorry. Let's drink. Yeah, it says, yeah, you're blacking out. I know. Well, give me time. Watch this. Here we go. Oh, Alan Wexler is here. He says his first class is Friday.
Ooh.
Yeah, Alan, I feel you, man. It's although I have to say I had a very good group of students this year, so I think that bodes well. Tonight, want to talk about what we're drinking, or you want me to talk about it?
I'll have you talk about it because I'm going to butcher the pronunciation.
Well,
We're drinking a red wine.
we are drinking a Montepulciano,
There you go.
to be specific, which I'm happy about. Our artist tonight, Mr. Dean Snyder, we got a recommendation on what he would be drinking, so we decided to also have one so we can compare some notes. Zoom teaching is a blur. Mike Rader, good to see you, man. Yeah, it is a blur, but it's an exhausting blur, right? It hurts a little bit. All right. Let us know what you're drinking in the chat. Do you want me to ASMR this thing for our audience?
Yes, please.
Yeah?
It usually sounds so good.
All right, if you've got headphones on, you're going to love this because this one's going to be like delicious. You ready? Here we go. Ready? Oh my God, that was
lovely.
That was amazing. That was amazing. You know, we Twitch stream on the podcast channel, but soon will it be on the ASMR channel.
Very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now let me turn your mic down before we kill people with it. Solid pours from John Park. Bottoms up from Boo Jazz. Boo Jazz is here.
Hello.
Good to see you. Yeah, that's a pretty decent pour. We got Dean up here on the other monitor, which you can't see yet because we're holding out on you. But cheers to you, Dean, and cheers to you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to all of you out there. Let us know what you're drinking in the chat as per the usual. Yeah, this is nice and dark, so we'll see how this goes.
Ooh, that's nice.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, even Dean said this was a good one, so we picked out a good one. Mike Rader says, F it. I got to go pour a glass now. All right, good. It is a little chewy. Glenn Lavertu is here. He's finishing up the Rioja from last week. That's probably opened up really nicely. That's good. Yeah, it's good weather for reds.
It is.
Right?
This is definitely red weather.
Now, one thing I've got to get Terry into a little bit because, you know, I've spent some time in France and she just doesn't buy this. But I am a huge fan of, you know, a good blush wine in the summer with a nice salad. It's very refreshing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very, you know, it's good.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm sure. Yes.
She just doesn't want to hear that.
Well, I have different memories of being 13 and my parents getting white Zinfandel, so kind of scarred me there. I don't want to look at it, but who knows? I know rosé is very lovely, but it's just I'm not quite there yet.
I'm going to convert you.
So, okay.
Carolyn Thau, if you're watching, we got a converter on this one.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
you had a show you wanted to talk about, right?
I did. It's actually a brandy wine, and it's all the way up until April. I'm going to have to check the date for you, but I believe the first week of April.
What's the show?
Well, they're doing a Wayne Thiebaud retrospective. So they're going to have a whole fantastic in the flesh paintings, and you can go right about now. I think it's opening up this weekend all the way through April. We're going for my birthday because that's what I want to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really
I'll take
excited
you.
about
I'll
that.
take. As a matter of fact, I will. That's not even going to be a chore. That's
Yeah.
going to be like, that's going to be a treat.
Yeah, I did post a link to it on our Facebook page. So if you go check that out, you can see more details.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so check that out.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we could all go together.
Ooh. We can all meet up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan Wexler's drinking a nice Chianti. I'm assuming when he says we're talking Alan and Ellen are here. Boojaz says he's still drinking the peak Japanese whiskey. That sounds awesome. And
Very
John Park
nice.
says it's also tawny port weather.
It is.
And I'm going to be having one of those shortly.
That sounds great.
That actually sounds really good.
Yeah.
Maybe port next week. Well, we have to think of what's appropriate for our guest.
Yeah, we're going to have the guests pick it out.
Our guest next week is Elsa Riveros, Colombian artist, also a singer. Very much looking forward to having her on. So we'll chat with her about what we should be drinking there.
Yep.
The brandy wine thing sounds really good.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Let's see. 63 says, Terri, you've got to do rosé from Côte de Provence. They are spectacular.
Maybe we'll do that on the show, and then you can all watch my expression.
You just got to do
sure
it.
It's very good. I'm sure I'm not going to, pucker up.
A little
or
salad niçoise and,
post-traumatic stress disorder stuff,
on a porch overlooking a body of water. We've got, it's a body of water. We could, it's perfect.
There
It's
you
perfect.
go.
All right, let's stop talking about that. Do we want to start introducing our artists tonight? Do we have any other business to cover? I feel like that we're missing a piece of business.
Not really. We're gearing up for the 100 and Art Tour.
That is true.
That's coming up soon.
The 100 and Art Tour is going to be April 30th and May 1st. So it falls on that weekend. We will actually be in the 100 and Art Tour. Our studio will be open. You can come and visit us on Sunday, May 1st. I don't know the hours, but it's like something like 12 to 4 or 11 to 4. But we'll be here. We're both going to be showing off our work in our little studio outside. So that could be exciting. That's one piece of business. And of course, the second piece of business that we always try to talk about, and I often forget lately, is how to support us. So number one, if you are here watching and you have not followed us on Twitch, by the way, thanks Frank Rakowski for the follow. I saw that. Appreciate that. If you're here. If you are here and you have not followed us yet, please follow us. You might be here on YouTube, so you can subscribe. You might be here on Twitch, so give a follow. And you might be here on Facebook. If you are, leave a like on that Facebook page. We would love that. That's really important to us, actually, so we appreciate it. Okay, business is out of the way. Now we can start introducing Dean.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. So, to begin with, this is going to be a longer introduction than usual. His career has spanned multiple decades, so there's a lot to talk about. Tonight's artist was born in Philadelphia and grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He's an artist and an educator who holds a BFA in photography and sculpture from the Kansas City Art Institute and an MFA with a concentration in sculpture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. From his website, Snyder has received numerous artist fellowships, including from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation, the Berkshire Taconic Arts Foundation, the National Endowments for the Arts, the New England Foundation for the Arts, the Rhode Island State Council for the Arts, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the Vermont State Council for the Arts, and the Illinois Arts Council. I'm not finished yet.
I'm not suggesting you are.
He has shown nationally and internationally. Some of these venues have included the Tang Museum, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games in Beijing Olympic Park. Sydney, Australia's Sculpture by the Sea, Berlin Fashion Week, and Lima's something I'm going to mispronounce, Instituto Cultural Peruano. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dean Snyder.
Hiya, Dean.
Hi, Todd. Hi, Terri.
Hi.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh,
thanks for coming on. It's an honor to have you. We're super excited. So how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. I mean, it's winter and all of that up here, but it's good. Good. I'm on sabbatical from teaching this year, so I'm having a really good stretch in my studio.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every single person in this audience, I'm going to guess, is experiencing the cold. I don't know
Yeah.
because even the people we have from far away are like in Chicago. So, I think they're also experiencing that cold. But you are no exception to that being where you are. So where should we start tonight?
Well, we have lots to look at.
Yes, we do. We have a ton to look at. I'll man the slides. You man the helm.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I do want to remind people, if you think of a question or anything like that, just type it in the chat and we will get to it. We like to have them lined up for Dean.
Yep.
But one way to start talking that Todd and I have found that sometimes we fail to do is that we never have the artists talk about their work in a general way. So that would probably be the best place to start. So if you could just maybe talk to us in a general way about your art and what you do as an artist.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I could start with photography. I kind of work backwards. I mean, I came into sculpture through photography. And I still have a lot of interest in photography, even though I don't practice it. I look at it a lot. But I do a lot of drawing, and drawing is kind of the linchpin in a lot of the things that I do in my studio. So there's a fair amount of that activity that is largely, for me, experimental. I do a lot of different things with drawing. I've drawn with tattoo equipment and things like that over the years, but in general, what I try to do with drawing is come to a resting spot at some point where I decide to make an object, and so some of the drawing activity informs the next move I make in terms of making a thing. And that the part of the sculpture practice that maybe isn't readily seen unless you look at all the work over the years is I kind of move through periods of material interests. I work with a particular material for a while, then I kind of move on to another material and process for a while. And right now I'm working mostly with epoxy resins and different reinforcement fabrics, working very directly, carving in foam and laminating or using very basic mold making in order to produce the objects.
Nice.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions actually. One of which, and this might come later. Let me pop through a few slides here so everybody can start to see, like, get a general sense of some of the. I know you just talked about drawing. I do have sculptures loaded up.
Well, we can flip ahead too, because I do have some of those drawings.
You do have some of the drawings down here, right? The tattoo ones you have?
I do, but also some of the renderings that go all the way down here. We start getting into here.
Yep, I've got those. So, we could start in a place like this.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
So, how do you, let me ask you this. When you're working on a drawing, and then you decide to move to some of your materials, how do you make the translational leap between what you're drawing? And because I noticed that there's a lot of there's a lot of material appreciation in the work that you do. Your work seems to me to be like very high on the list of importance in your work is surface or is the texture of a material. And so how do you make the translational leap? Like, what makes you decide that?
It's a good question. Maybe I'll just go back in history a little bit because coming out of graduate school, a lot of the work that I did, I have a big background in foundry work. I worked in an iron foundry for a period of time, but coming out of graduate school, I got very interested in the pattern making aspect of foundry work, and I worked in wood almost exclusively for a really long time. directly. And so I'm kind of putting this into a larger question that you just asked, because what happens with the drawing thing with me is that these days I look at a possible object that I'm going to make, and now for me it's mostly like color and surface decisions that come up, because the process I'm using, unlike other materials I've worked with, is rather faceless unless you give it qualities like color or a satin surface or a glossy surface or a rough surface. And so that part is, I intentionally kind of draw in black and white so I can fill in those gaps while I'm working on the objects.
Yeah, I'm bouncing between some images of the drawings and then of some of the work that you're doing. I have 2 comments in the chat from one of our viewers. We call him 63. But he says, I just want to personally thank Dean, since I think he helped me get into the Bennington MFA program back in 2000. Thanks, Dean. He says, appreciate your evaluation of my work, and your work is incredible.
Thanks. That's nice. Thanks.
Yeah, we usually, like, some people use like anonymous screen names, and I don't make the leap, but I know who that is. And then he also says, how large are the drawings when you're working on them?
Yeah, well, that they vary. That first drawing that you showed is actually almost 60 inches by 30 something.
Wow.
And I've done really large, I've done like panoramic drawings too, big drawings. That's actually an excerpt from one of the larger graphite drawings I've done. And, all the way down to like 9 by 12 journal drawings. I do a ton of those. And then some of these others that, like this one, for instance, they're more graphically produced. They're actually cutouts in museum board and then hand rendered with silver ink. So they vary in size.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I love to make some of the connections between, like, when we see something like this, and then we sort of backtrack through the sculpture, and it's like it's not that I'm trying to find one, I'm trying to pick one, because I see this and then I move to this, right? And I love these connections between that linearity, that organic nature, that kind of, it's almost free form, like
undulating motion too. Yeah.
Right. So tell us about how, in your process, because if I look at, I'm going to pull up 2 images now. I'm going to look at this one, right?
Okay.
And then I'm going to look at something like, say, this one, right?
Oh, boy.
Now, obviously, there's a very different, but it feels to me like, and this being an older piece and the previous one being a newer piece, I get the sense that your work has taken a turn more into a more intuitive kind of build, a more sort of allowing the piece to really speak as you work. But can you talk about how you've changed your thinking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that, and again, I'm going to like lean on drawing with this, because I kind of had an epiphany at one point when I was doing these, working on a really large drawing. I had this epiphany that I could, easily work directly from that space into actual 3D space. But I needed another process to make those objects in order to do that, in order to work more directly. So all those years that I worked in wood, and this, I think some of this is influenced by my early interest in photography, because one of the things, I was a really lousy photographer, but I really loved the process of making photographs, all of it. I liked being in the dark room. I liked developing the film, developing the pictures, the whole thing. So I'm down under it. I'm kind of a process freak. And so that that challenge to myself with the drawings led me to look for something I could do a little bit more directly, And so carving in high density foam and working that way allowed me to work very quickly, right? And do editing like you do in a drawing when you're erasing.
Right.
Like you carve something, then you can cut it up and stick it back together. And then you can commit to it by, giving it a solid surface eventually.
Right. And that's kind of how it felt to me, because it felt like you were utilizing the sculptural materials in the sense of with the sensibility or sensitivity of drawing, right? It's a much more immediate kind of approach.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, 63 says process. Amen. Photo ceramics. Let's see. Mike Rader has something to say. And also, one thing I can do, Dean, is I'm going to pin some of these comments to the screen. So you're going to see them pop up in the middle of the screen.
Okay.
So Mike Rader says, when looking at this on a flat screen, and I don't know why it's not popping up for me. This thing bonks every once in a while. But it says, while looking at this on a flat screen, the sculpture and the drawing are one in the same. Even with this one, it has the scale shift you see in the drawings. Crazy about this piece. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of an interesting comment, actually.
It is. Yeah. That is interesting.
And when it comes to scale, and I'm totally like, I'm
fine.
owning the show again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Go.
I'm going to ask one last question.
No,
And then
you're
I'm
doing great.
all right. Okay. Let's talk about pieces specifically and some of the work specifically, because we're talking a little bit about process here. And back when these pieces were being made, and we're talking, I'm going to jump over to something else here, but back when you were doing this work and this notion of scale, right? This material is not typically seen on this kind of scale, but can you talk a little bit about your process working on these and what they're made out of and how you built them?
Okay. I'm glad you're showing this piece. I still have it. It's one of my longstanding old-time favorites of my own work. But there's a story. I'm going to digress into this story.
Go right ahead.
I was living in Oakland at the time, and I wasn't quite ready to make the jump into like plastics and composites, but I wanted to make translucent objects. And in my neighborhood, there was a saddle maker. This guy was a Mexican gentleman who had a small saddle shop. And on my way walking to work, I passed his shop and saw these saddle trees that are for traditional Spanish saddles. And they're made out of loosely joined wood and rawhide. So you could see all the wood through the rawhide.
Ooh.
And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to do that because it still has the language of joinery and I can, develop forms. So this is, there's a long little bit of a learning curve here because what rawhide is untanned leather. And it's prepared in a particular way so that it can be hydrated and then stretched into shapes. So anyway, I found a source for this stuff, and this is unusual. It's unusual to see objects made of rawhide this large. Normally, rawhide is used for small containers or in Native American culture, they made a thing called a parfleche, which is for carrying spiritual tools and objects around. So you rarely see it at this scale. But what was for me kind of interesting and weird about working like this, which I did for a while, I made a lot of these rawhide works, is they happen really fast. I would kind of make the thing, sew it up, and then inflate it with my shop vac. And then the sculpture was done. There was like no sanding, no surface to treat, nothing. And that was a little it kind of dislodged me a little bit, because then it made me think, okay, well, if they're going to make these this fast, I really have to like take a different approach to how I'm doing this stuff.
Gotcha.
So I played with scale. I played with all kinds of other things, what the material could, how it could perform. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that came around. And I think I worked in rawhide off and on for about 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I love these pieces, and there's some comments coming in now from a whole bunch of different angles about these and other things you've done. I was always fascinated with the fact that you had to soak that rawhide like in a tub to get it to become soft and malleable, and then you'd sew it while it was wet, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And then the act of inflating was what hardened it.
Yeah, the inflation, these works became a little more difficult to make when I moved to New England because of the humidity here. But in California, we're so dry, they would dry in like 12 hours.
That's fantastic.
And so the hot air from the shop vac, they would dry and harden up. But it's basically collagen fiber, so there's no when they tan leather, they make it permanently supple by breaking down those fibers, right?
Gotcha.
And so this is not that. This is not tanned leather. Excuse me. So, but yeah, there were some other things that, going back to drawing with this body of work in particular, this goes back to my childhood a little bit, because my dad was a large animal veterinarian. And at one point, we were having a conversation about this, because in Lancaster County, people do their own butchering. And I saw that a lot as a kid. But my dad said something really odd to me at one point. He said, we used to tattoo the pigs. And he said, and I realized that when you do that, it stays in the skin, when you try to tan the hide. So I started to put tattooing directly onto the rawhide itself and doing that kind of drawing on the sculptures. And I'm really still very interested in that. I'm kind of circling back on that idea a little bit right now. Is like where drawing intersects with form directly.
Yeah. So there's actually a couple of questions that refer to the drawing a little bit. I threw that video up there because it had images of the farm that you grew up on in it, which I love. And since you were making the quote, I decided to throw it in there. But let me read a couple of comments that are coming in right now. I'm jumping all over the place a little bit, so I gotta slow down here. So Boo Jazz is in Chicago. Jamie and I noticed a lot of vintage cartoons on your Instagram. Do you have a fascination with old cartoons?
I do. Particularly the Fleischer brothers. I have a large collection of old cartoons, vintage cartoons. And I think what's interesting to me about especially the old Popeyes, the old Betty Boops, and even the earlier Fleischers, when they were just basically inventing rotoscoping,
right?
It's just there's this wonderful, you can feel the joy of that moment of invention in those things, because everything is moving. Like when you see some of those very early Betty Boops, when she's walking down the street, the windows of those row houses in Brooklyn, they're all moving. Everything is like timed to jazz, and it's just everything's in rhyme and in sync. So I'm pretty obsessed with that stuff, and so I have a big collection of them, and I look at them myself for my own pleasure. But then a while ago, I just decided to pull clips for Instagram of moments that I find interesting in those cartoons, like just really arresting, like weird stuff that happens in them. And some of that, I guess for me, some of that is just that the surrealism of it, the American surrealism of it, that is a big part of my graphic life. I think about that a lot.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I see that comment that just came in that relates to that. Ripple Flux is here from Kentucky. Hey, Ripple Flux, nice to see you. There's a couple of other things. Do you want to read One Good Kings? Because he's talking about you.
Yes, he says that I mentioned the undulating motion earlier, and these pieces all seem to have a sense of respiration peristalsis. Yeah, they have a lot of living qualities and animated qualities to them.
Yeah, they do. They do. And the fact that they are filled with air,
yes,
right? And the fact that they almost feel like they are breathing.
Yes.
Earlier, 63 said something about translucency, a beautiful sense of translucency. At least it looks that way. No, that's actually the way it is. The light does sort of penetrate and get held in there. So One Good King's comment's actually really, you know, that's really quite nice. And how it relates back to the Betty Boop thing and that sort of movement. Let's see. Glenn Lavertu says something that occurs to me is the early sculpture is very much about an evident making process, while the new work is a process where the hand disappears into the glossy material, like the difference between shaker basket weaving and building hot rods. Those are two interesting connections.
Yeah. That's a really interesting observation. I think that I think about that quite a bit because it does disappear, even though it's all there. You know, like my methods for working with epoxy resin are pretty garage. You know, they're not really high tech at all, even though the outcome might look kind of highly produced. So there's the handwork is not as visible as in other materials I've worked in. And I think there's some part of that I'm circling around right now. The most recent work that you had on at the very beginning of the broadcast has got some painting that I'm doing now that I'm kind of sourcing from watercolor work I've been doing. So I'm working directly with dyed resin instead of like hot rod paint, for instance, for surfaces. So the color is now more inherent in the material rather than applied. And the rationale for that is actually just to try to get closer to a more of a biomorphism, you know, like where the thing is what it is, you know. And so yeah, it's a different set of tools too, because when you're working with wood and you're working in rawhide, those tools make marks, right? They, you know, you using a plane to flatten a board or to carve a board, you're leaving traces of your hand working. And with this process that I've been working with now, not so much. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, not so much.
Mike Rader says, wow, I see his dad's profession in a lot of the work.
Yeah.
He says, in that context, the other works look like innards. It says, is his dad's work a big influence? Geez, he goes, I love the Fleischers. I also see rubber hose animation techniques in the drawings.
Right. Yeah. Well, yes, growing up in that community, especially like with my dad being so involved in large animal, I always qualify this, and people laugh when they hear me say this, but he was a large animal vet, and there's a huge difference. And the difference is with large animals, you don't actually are not dealing directly with human feelings. It's more about the farmer and livestock and livelihood. You know what I mean? Like it's when you're dealing with small animal veterinarians, they have to deal with empathy and people's feelings over a beloved pet and all of that. And so my childhood was mostly watching my dad working on these large critters in really bizarre ways, like hoisting horses up in the middle of the night in a barn and pigs giving birth and goats, and we had all that stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, but I'd say it did have a big impact on me. Growing up around my dad's profession and seeing all that stuff. Yeah.
All right, I'm popping through a couple of more here.
Now, you said in the video when you were reflecting back on growing up in Lancaster and watching your dad, one thing you said was there was no art anywhere. You didn't have it around you. So I'm curious what made you take that leap into the art world.
Yeah, it's a good question, Terri. It's a really good question. I actually think about this from time to time. Because, yeah, I didn't go to an art museum until I was maybe 17. And I had a really excellent experience in elementary school. You know, we had, for a small rural community, Pennsylvania was pretty enlightened in those days, I think, when I think back on it. But I had a really good art teacher. I had a really good music teacher, and it kind of set me off right away. I was really, I guess my access to anything art in the art world at that time would have been through radio and like rock and roll,
right?
Early rock and roll and all of that. And so all of that became like this dream. Like what's out there, you know, beyond the farm. And as soon as I was off the farm, everything really changed pretty fast. But I have to credit a couple of really, really important key educators and my grandmother, who was very interested in the arts. She taught me how to sew. I spent a lot of time with her in the library. She's a big reader. And so I think books, I'd rack it up to like my experience with my grandmother and books and making things by hand a lot.
Yeah.
And my sixth grade art teacher, Rodney Dehaven, who I still like think of today. Yeah. So those were motivators for me, because I think for a lot of artists will say this, you know, like when you were not a very good student in school, but you realized like a lot of your learning was visual, you leaned hard into that stuff, right?
Yeah. I know it well.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that, number one, because my art classes and the visual side of things for me was very strong. And it was, in fact, my grandmother who taught me how to draw, and my mother who is still trying to teach me how to sew, because I think she's lost patience with me. But I noticed that our screen, I apologize in advance to everybody that our screen is blacking out like this. I am not sure what's going on, but I'm trying to fix it. So we're doing our best here. So I'm sorry, did you have something else you wanted to ask, Dean, while I try to figure out the what's going on with this bloody camera by any chance?
Well, we have a whole bunch of questions here. So it looks like one of the questions I had was whether or not you worked from sketchbooks and what kind of prep work you do for the sculptures. It does seem that the sketch and that interaction with the two-dimensional sense kind of transforms itself into a three-dimensional sense. It seems that you do work quite a bit from sketching.
Yeah. I think when I worked in other materials, I did much more planning than I do now. But I do when I'm in the middle of working on a couple of. I have like 4 that I'm working on right now, all at the same time, and I do a lot of the mechanics of it in sketchbooks, trying to figure it out, problem solve it. So yeah, I do a lot of that journaling, sketchbook drawing stuff while I'm working. But the thing with working in the foam the way I do now, it is a little bit like drawing. So there's a lot of stuff I can do in mock-up without committing to it right away.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's a different kind of drawing that allows me the freedom to edit as I go along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So got a lot of comments coming in right now. Let's see. We have got a lot of stuff coming up about grandmothers. First of all, 63 asks, do you prefer the presence or absence of the hand? I don't want to miss that comment before.
Oh, really? That's an interesting, I guess for me, I'm so there's two positions on that. I guess like the audience will look at the work and they'll see that, but when I look at it, I get a neurological twitch because I've spent so much time sanding. So I see the hand in there and I see all the screw ups that nobody else really notices. But I don't think I'll ever. I guess I'm this far along in my career. I've always been kind of a solitary studio person. I make my own work. I don't work with anybody else, and so I don't know. I associate myself in some ways with like artists that back in my lineage, Chicago lineage, like H.C. Westerman and artists like that who kind of work one piece at a time at a very human scale. And so I don't feel the absence of the hand myself. Because up close, when you look at these really up close, these are not Jeff Koons sculptures. These are not like made by Universal Studio kind of production level.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
That's an interesting point to make. I'm going to fly down a list of comments here because there's a whole bunch of stuff coming in. So One Good King says, grandma, books, and great teachers, a real blessing. My mother mentions that she has lots of patience, basically referring to my sewing comment. There's some longer form comments. I'm going to skip those and come back to them. So let's see. 63 says, funniest thing for me is that my first art, in quotes, teacher in 7th grade was Mrs. Snyder. No joke. So there's a connection. Whoa. Let's see. Memory Vessel asked a question and then had it answered for her. So John Park says, listening to this discussion, I can definitely understand the biomorphic shape's origin, but there also seems to be a branches or trees in here. What is the background for that inspiration, or are they meant to be more arterial?
Oh, that's really, boy, I wish I could show this work that I'm in the middle of right now, because those two things that person just brought up is what's happening in this work right now.
Oh, beautiful.
It's an arterial branch. It's neither branch nor arteries, but it's the same thing that's kind of like superimposed on itself, right? So it's that language of how something grows into a particular form, like a branch does, right, or arteries do. And then by shifts in color and how you render the form, you can kind of take the audience to both places sometimes simultaneously.
Right.
Yeah. But that's a really cool observation. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, we got to get John Park on for a guest host.
Yes,
we got to get him on as a guest host.
He'd be an awesome guest host.
Right, he can replace me. You can hang out with him. That's cool. Alan Wexler asks, not sure you remember, but you invited me to RISD to give a talk. Is teaching...
Of course I remember.
Of course. How do you know? As a matter of fact, didn't you do that in 2000 or 2001?
Yep.
And that was the talk that I met Alan at. So there's a synergistic thing happening here. But he asks, is teaching an important part of your practice?
Excellent question, Alan. Thanks for that. Yes. I mean, I've been doing it a long time. And, it's interesting. I got my MFA at the Art Institute of Chicago. And at that time, and I don't know if it was at the time or because of the nature of the program I was in, going out and teaching wasn't really something that we were really encouraged or told to do. We were told to just go out and, be artists, get crummy jobs, support yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so I worked in art museums for a while. I was a preparator. Long answer to the question, a friend of mine who had been doing some teaching needed a replacement for a year. So I did that. And I sort of fell into teaching, but now I like 35 years on down the road, especially in these last, I would say these last like 10, 15 years, it's a huge part of my practice. Yeah. It's absolutely huge. Yeah. I think I don't think it was ever a calling for me in particular. I made it into that for myself. But I really think for me, it's super important to work with young people and help them develop a visual vocabulary for themselves. Yeah.
I feel like also in that by participating in developing that visual vocabulary, we're sparking those idea centers in our own minds about our own practice. I mean, all of that relates back and it feeds off of one feeds off the other, I feel like.
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. And surprisingly, during COVID, because I was doing most of my broadcasting from my studio, I was able to use things that I do routinely in the studio as like teaching tools, unlike I've never been able to do before, you know, because I was like either live broadcasting or recording, doing video recordings of it. But yeah, I'm also going a little bit deeper into Alan's question. It's the discourse too, because, you know, when you work by yourself, developing a discourse or having like questions that you develop in your head, it's really great to crowdsource that with young people that you're working with. I mean, really, really good. And so every year my syllabuses for my courses get kind of churned over just a little bit because I'm thinking of different things that I want my students to think about too. So
yeah. And Alan Wexler chimes back in on that. He says, teachers are social sculptors, to quote Joseph Beuys.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that I love that notion of crowdsourcing your ideas in with that group and how that sort of, he says that's exactly how he feels about teaching as well. And so do I. And now that you're finishing your MFA in teaching, you're going to kind of be walking down that road as well.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Yeah.
MSN.
Yeah. Still, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, did we miss anything? Oh, John Park did mention before about the arterial thing. He says it's interesting because I said branches and Jess, his wife, said arteries. And so I combined the two in that comment. So he's giving credit to Jess on that one, which is good. So you always ask about music.
I do, and this is just kind of going into, so we talk about your work for a little bit, but what about when you're in the studio? Like, how do you get into that mood? Do you listen to a certain type of music? Do you have certain rituals that you do? Do you have to drink coffee? Do you kick back with something on, Audible? What do you do?
Pretty much music. Yeah, and my tastes are pretty eclectic, even though, it varies. Sometimes I'm like, I do a whole year and it's just John Coltrane, or I do the other extreme of that, because when I was in high school, I was really deep into psychedelic music. So I still listen to a lot of that. I listen to Jimi Hendrix and that period of music quite a bit, and punk. I don't know. I have very eclectic tastes, but it depends. Like lately, I've been kind of on this bend with the Foo Fighters. I've just been listening to Foo Fighters nonstop almost.
They're really good.
They're so good.
They're really good.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was a blind spot for me. It came up a little while ago, and I listened to a couple of tracks, and I thought, how have I not been listening to the Foo Fighters?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm listening to right now. but yeah, music is a big part of getting going for me. And I'm not a big coffee drinker anymore. I so I depend on music to get me there. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
Good. John Park asks, I know photography was part of your earlier work, but looking at how so much of your current work is based on abstract shapes, I'm wondering what your photography was like. Was it more abstract and graphical?
No, I mean, it was so long ago. And it was the first year out of my second year in undergraduate school. And to be honest with you, it was more like of a peer pressure thing because all my friends were going into photography and I wanted to be with my friends. But I realized, here's the story. I was making pinhole cameras when I got really interested in making the cameras, and I just got sidetracked and really realized I don't want to make pictures. I want to make weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get kicked out of the department or anything like that, but there were some long, hard conversations like, why do you want to do this? So yeah, my photography tastes are, I would say, kind of, I don't know, or rather ordinary. I mean, I look at a lot of like, Dorothea Lange, that WPA period of photography, E.J. Bullock, E.J. Bullock, who was the photographer of the red light district in New Orleans. I like that kind of what they call shooter's photography, where you're just taking dandelions, sort of like Lee Friedlander. My tastes in photography are not in any way related to what I do in my studio, I have to say. So it's just more of a historical thing that I think about. And actually, getting back to teaching just for a minute, I do this segment in one of my studios where we talk about the relationship of sculpture to photography historically. Because when you go back to the very founding days of the processes, the things that got photographed were sculptures because they didn't move. They needed subjects that could be stationary for a really long period of time.
Sure.
So Nadar and all those cats, they lined up these giant devices and focused it on a sculpture in the middle of the Tuileries in Paris and made a 12-hour exposure. Pretty interesting. So there's been some scholarship on the relationship of sculpture and photography. I'm really interested in that. The artists that use it.
Yeah, 63 is running a whole. I don't want to miss out on his comments. Earlier, he said like the Nick Nolte thing from Life Lessons. I don't quite get that reference, but I want to know more about that. He also says whiter shade of pale and all of that, talking from a music standpoint. Then he also mentions, he goes, yeah, you're definitely a process guy. Make the camera, not the photo. And then he mentions Brancusi as sculptures in terms of photography, for sure.
Yeah.
Earlier, Mike Rader said, hey, Dean, wacky question, but in looking at these last two, the one I've got on the screen now and this one, he says, what do you imagine it's stuffed with?
Both of these objects were originally rawhide objects that got transposed into stone or bronze. And so I still imagine that they're filled with air. Yeah.
Just a real quick one. Carolyn Thau, we were talking about you before you came on. I know you showed up late. Thanks for coming. I'll talk to you soon. But she says, nice meeting you, Dean. Great show. She has to run. It's not that we're over, but she chimed in there, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Yeah, but I have to say, even though these were rawhide objects that were then cast, this one being what looks to be concrete, it feels stuffed. It feels like now all of a sudden with the translucency gone, it's got an outward movement that feels, tense.
Right. Well, these were, these were opportunities for public commissions, and so the one thing about a lot of the materials that I work with are, they're not really suitable for going out of doors, right? And rawhide in particular. I mean, I've had some humorous stuff with rawhide over the years because people with dogs, it's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, I guess that would.
It's the single largest use of that material in this nation.
Yes.
It's for chew toys.
Yeah. It's chew toys for dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, when you transpose them in another material, I totally get that. They look more like, button tuck upholstery. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike Rader says it reminds me of the David's heel, beautifully soft and gives to pressure. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
I like that. Okay, I just want to get down here. I do want to show that video real quick and kind of just let that run. I am not going to play the sound on it simply because I know there's music in there and we'll get whacked with some DMCA stuff for copyright and all that. But I am just going to kind of let this run because it's got some images from inside the studio. It's got some stuff of the farm, a little bit of process of you working on the foam, which is so good to see. Is that you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's me, man.
That's awesome. I love that picture of you.
That's my dad. Yeah, and that's the road back to our barn. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh
yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I remember one thing I was so enamored with in your studio when I was there was you have the single largest wood turning lathe I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, there's a quick story about that. I'm Martin Purrier and I are longtime old friends, and we built when we were still living in Chicago and bachelors at that time. We both built joiners benches and wood lathes together. And when my wife and I moved to the Bay Area, I actually enlarged my lathes so that I could turn larger columns. I made a little bit of money doing that kind of work when I lived out there.
Right.
Yeah, I have a very large lathe.
Yeah. I remember just walking into your studio and being like, how long of a piece can you turn on that? And what was it? It was like 10 feet, isn't it?
Yeah, at one point I could do that. I cut it down now because I don't really have a need for it. But I built a lathe that had the capacity to turn 10 feet. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine seeing a 10-foot long chunk of maple spinning at a high rate of speed.
Yeah.
I'm going to excuse myself from the room when that happens. That's just like...
Yeah, it was... Well, I did it for a purpose, but it's I have a more conventional size lathe now, so it's reasonable.
Right. 63 says, funny, I do see a little Martin in Dean's work, and maybe there's some of Dean in Martin's work. So we did a show on him a while back because he's always been one of my app's all-time favorites, and we covered his work for a little, for one episode. And what's he like?
We're old friends. He's a terrific person, and he's a very private person. It's I don't know. It's just been an honor to be his friend. I've watched his career. When I knew him, he was still teaching full-time at the University of Illinois. So I've watched his career really go some amazing places. It's just been such fun to watch that. But he's a very thoughtful man. Like myself, we both have a passion for books. We do a lot of reading. He's got an amazing library, and now, it's remarkable. So when we get together, that's kind of like what we talk about. It's like, what books are you reading? Right. What books have you bought?
Right.
And what stuff are you looking at? Because what's great about Martin, and he's just turned 80 this year, is that he still keeps looking at young artists.
Yeah.
He's very, very generous man. Yeah.
On that note, what are you reading right now?
Yeah, and who are you looking at?
Well, let's see. What am I reading right now? I do a lot of audiobooks, so I actually just finished Annie Proulx's Bark Skins, which is this epic novel. It's about the lumber industry in Canada. From point of origin to today. And it's told through this kind of epic family story. That was really, really, really excellent. And I've been reading, I tend to read a lot of science fiction too.
Yeah.
It's easy to listen to when I'm working. So Jeff Vandermeer, I don't know if you guys know Jeff Vandermeer, but Area X, I read that trilogy. That was recent. That was really great. And yeah.
Cool.
What else?
I like that. I like the science fiction side of things with this work. That feels so right. It feels
Jeff
so
Vandermeer is amazing. He's sort of he is what I would call kind of an American well, it's almost like surrealism, because what he's looking at is like how all this kind of bioengineering goes awry eventually.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's magic realism for today. It's beautiful. The imagery in his books is astonishing. I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and anybody in particular that you're looking at artistically?
Gosh, right now, let's see. Who am I looking at right now? Golly, I guess right now there was a young artist that I invited up to RISD. I saw his breakout show when he got out of Columbia. His name's Hugh Hayden.
Okay.
And I've been looking at his work quite a bit. I've been following him quite a bit.
Okay.
Very interesting young artist, I think. Hugh Hayden.
Okay. We'll check it out.
Yeah, I'd put that right up there.
Okay.
Because there's a bunch of artists I continue to look at, that I like a lot. Giuseppe Pannoni, and who's like a big figure in my life. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I'm going to throw Dean's website up on the screen right now. So if you want to see Dean's work, you can head over to deansnyderstudio.com and definitely catch him on Instagram, which is at Dean Snyder Studio. Follow his work. Actually on Instagram, you're going to get the Monday morning cartoon, where every Monday morning, it's Monday morning, y'all, and you get some awesome piece of animation history on there. There's a lot of questions, last minute questions, because I know we definitely got to let you go. But let's see. There's that one. Boo Jazz says, have you shown in Chicago anytime over the last few years?
No, not recently. Not in recent years. But I showed in Chicago for a really long time. I'm thinking about it. It'd be fun to do that again. I feel like Chicago's kind of a hometown for me.
Yeah. And let's see, Mike Rader says, such great work and a great show as always. Here come all the thank yous are coming in. So everybody loves this. Dean, this was great, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, you guys. This was really fun.
Yeah, this was a really good time. And definitely if you're showing anywhere coming up at any time in the future, let us know. We'd love to let all the listeners know that you're going to be out there doing that.
We'll do that. Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. All right, my man, we're going to let you run. We're going to go to our final little goodbye to everybody, but thanks.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the questions, too. They were really good.
Awesome.
Yeah,
all right. We'll talk to you soon, Dean. Thanks.
All right. Good night.
Good night. All right. So we're going to pop back over here. That was awesome, as usual.
As usual.
Right?
Yeah, he was very, very cool.
So good.
I'm actually looking at Hugh Hayden right now, too. He looks like somebody to check out.
Oh, is this his work?
This is him.
I've seen this piece.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
really
I saw that
fantastic.
work, and here we go. The camera's going to start to bug out on us. Let's put some nice music on while we close
There
out
we
here.
go.
So, I don't know what's going on with this camera, but I will say this. It's a testament to why we need support on this show. Because that clunky, it's like having the Millennium Falcon do our show for us. I got to keep reaching over and whacking the thing so it stays on. Sorry, I'm yelling
That's
at the camera.
okay.
It's annoying me.
That's
One night it's
okay.
the sound, the next night it's the
okay.
visuals. It's like we're trying to do a nice thing here.
We are.
Sorry.
Oh, well.
What are you gonna do?
All right.
Well, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, this
very
was fun.
much. And do we have any closing business for everybody?
Not that I can think of.
Not that you can think of.
Todd doesn't want to go.
I don't. I kind of want to stay on. You know, Jess Park says, enjoys Dean's work and the really great discussion. Thank you. 63 says, old man yells at cloud. Yeah. Wait, is that a piece you're talking about or me yelling at the... Maybe that's me yelling at the camera. Old man yells at cloud. Oh, wait a minute. We got a first-time chat from Frank Rakowski saying, yay. Thanks for the follow, by the way. I appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
good to see you. Where have you been, man? Let's see. Anybody else? 63 says about a modern-day Huxley. I missed that earlier when he was talking sci-fi. Anyway, this was a great show.
This was.
I will let everybody go now. Anyway, listen, next week we have Elsa Riveros on the show,
We
which
do.
we're super excited
Very
about.
excited,
So definitely
yeah.
make sure to join us for that. The following week, Pam Glick.
Glick.
So we got some really cool stuff in the hopper, really cool people coming on the show. We're excited about that.
Yeah.
We will talk to all of you very soon. Stay warm, stay well,
Yes.
and
Cheers.
cheers to all of you. Take care. Good night, everybody.